They're being replaced. The most shocking reality unfolding right now is this: companies across major industries are quietly but decisively reversing course on female hiring and retention, with artificial intelligence accelerating a purge that many never saw coming. And by the end of this discussion, you will understand exactly why the shift is not temporary, not accidental, and why it will reshape society in ways that demand attention from every thinking person watching through to the conclusion. Women are being replaced and don't even realize it. Imagine a world where the workforce that once celebrated diversity initiatives now systematically sidelines half of its talent pool, not through overt malice in most cases, but through cold calculations of risk, performance, cost, and technological replacement. Women are being replaced from society and do not even realize the full extent of it yet. Most of the job layoffs, including those driven by artificial intelligence, are disproportionately affecting women, particularly those who entered roles through diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Companies that laid off large numbers of employees in technology sectors as a result of artificial intelligence advancements have discovered that the technology cannot fully replace the human workforce in many areas, leading them to hire back workers. Yet the rehiring patterns reveal a clear preference, almost exclusively for men. The women who occupied many of those positions were often the lowest performers within their teams and had frequently been brought on board primarily because of diversity mandates rather than pure merit based selection. At the same time, 86% of companies have stopped pursuing female candidates for chief executive officer roles, a stark reversal from previous years of pushing for gender balance at the top. Female employees in fields historically dominated by men are experiencing sharp decreases in hiring rates and significant increases in termination rates. Technology companies are rushing to automate and replace positions that are predominantly held by women rather than those held by men. Men in these same fields are adapting by retraining themselves to work alongside artificial intelligence, mastering the tools and integrating them into their daily output, while women in comparable roles are being eliminated at a much faster pace and pushed out of the workforce entirely. Layoffs serve as a convenient mechanism for organizations to remove individuals perceived as more challenging to manage than their male counterparts. Individuals who demonstrate lower average performance levels deliver significantly less productive labor for the equivalent compensation, incur higher retention costs due to greater needs for time off, show a much higher likelihood of filing harassment related claims, and take considerably more sick days and paid time off than men do. Society appears to be leveraging artificial intelligence as a socially acceptable justification to reduce female participation in the workforce and, by extension, in broader societal structures. This pattern extends far beyond traditional office environments and into emerging technological frontiers. Technology firms are rapidly developing artificial intelligence chatbots and companion robots designed with heavy emphasis toward male users, creating interactive experiences that fulfill emotional, conversational, and even intimate needs without the complexities inherent in human relationships. Platforms that once relied entirely on human female content creators are aggressively incorporating artificial intelligence generated material to replace those creators, allowing the platforms to produce customized content that interacts directly with male consumers and delivers precisely what those consumers request at a fraction of the cost required to compensate actual women. Most men have now stepped back entirely from pursuing dating, committed relationships, and marriage, opting instead for alternatives that eliminate risk, drama, and unpredictability. These developments are interconnected pieces of a larger transformation where traditional roles and expectations are being dismantled, not by ideological campaigns, but by practical economic and technological forces that prioritize efficiency, reliability, and reduce liability. Consider the workplace dynamics that have evolved since major cultural movements brought heightened awareness to harassment issues. Research indicates that a significant portion of male managers experience discomfort when engaging in routine professional activities with female colleagues due to concerns over potential accusations. Studies show that substantial numbers of men avoid one on one meetings, mentoring sessions, or informal collaborations with women to protect their careers from scenarios where allegations, even if unfounded, can lead to immediate professional consequences. In academic settings, collaborations between male and female researchers at certain institutions have dropped dramatically, with men redirecting their professional networks toward other men to minimize exposure to risk. This avoidance behavior stems from real world examples where companies have handled complaints in ways that appear to favor swift resolution over thorough investigation, sometimes resulting in penalties for the accused, regardless of evidence. Men observe these patterns and adjust accordingly, choosing self preservation through distance rather than continued interaction that could jeopardize years of effort and achievement. The result is a self reinforcing cycle where women lose access to critical networking, guidance, and opportunities that historically accelerated career progression, not because of explicit exclusion policies, but because individual men make calculated decisions to limit contact. In physically demanding professions, the disparities become even more pronounced when performance metrics are objective and unforgiving. Training programs in military and emergency response fields reveal consistent patterns where female participants struggle to meet the same standards as their male counterparts in areas requiring raw strength and endurance. For instance, requirements such as pull ups or sustained holds of heavy loads show failure rates among women that far exceed those among men, leading to adjusted standards or prolonged training periods that highlight inherent biological differences rather than trainable skill gaps alone. When these differences manifest in high stakes environments like aviation incidents or firefighting operations, the consequences can include safety risks, equipment damage, or mission failures that prompt organizations to reevaluate hiring priorities. Competence in these roles is not negotiable. And when outcomes depend on physical capability, decision makers gravitate toward candidates who demonstrate reliable performance without qualification adjustments. This pragmatic approach contributes to declining female representation in such fields as the emphasis shifts back to merit and results over balanced demographics. The integration of artificial intelligence into hiring processes further amplifies these trends in unexpected ways. Early attempts to use algorithms for candidate screening revealed built in biases derived from historical data dominated by male resumes, causing the systems to favor male applicants even when gender identifiers were removed. Companies discontinued those specific tools due to fairness concerns, yet the underlying reality persists that patterns in past successful performance data often align more closely with male candidates in certain technical and analytical roles. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve, it enables organizations to evaluate candidates on pure output metrics rather than subjective impressions, stripping away factors like personal presentation or relational dynamics that sometimes influenced human decisions. In this environment, performance data speaks louder than diversity goals. And when that data consistently shows differences in productivity, reliability, or cost effectiveness, hiring practices adjust accordingly without requiring overt policy changes. Beyond corporate structures, the rise of artificial intelligence in personal and social domains accelerates the broader withdrawal of men from traditional interpersonal commitments. Artificial companions offer tailored interactions free from conflict, rejection, or legal entanglements, providing emotional consistency and customization that human relationships often lack due to individual complexities and mutual expectations. Men increasingly view these alternatives as superior options when weighed against the potential downsides of modern dating, including financial exposure, emotional volatility, and societal pressures that have shifted dramatically in recent decades. The appeal lies in control and predictability, qualities that artificial systems deliver reliably, while human partnerships require constant negotiation and compromise. As adoption grows, the demand for human female participation in both professional and personal spheres diminishes, creating a feedback loop where fewer opportunities exist and fewer incentives remain for engagement. These shifts are not isolated phenomena, but interconnected elements of a profound realignment driven by technology, economics, and risk assessment. Organizations prioritize stability and output in an era of rapid change. And when certain demographic patterns correlate with higher operational friction or cost, rational actors respond by minimizing those variables. Men adapt to the new landscape by upskilling, embracing tools that enhance their value, and choosing paths that reduce personal exposure to liability. Women who entered fields under different assumptions now face a contracting environment where merit based competition intensifies and external supports weaken. The conversation around these developments must remain grounded in observable data and logical outcomes rather than emotional appeals, because the forces at play operate on principles of efficiency and survival in a competitive global economy. The patterns we have examined so far reveal a constant thread running through modern workplaces, one where risk management has become the dominant lens through which decisions are made about who gets hired, who gets mentored, who gets promoted, and ultimately who remains in the workforce long term. When male managers and executives weigh the potential downsides of routine professional interactions with female colleagues against the straightforward productivity gains from collaborating exclusively with other men, the math often tips decisively toward caution. This is not a coordinated conspiracy or an expression of overt prejudice in most instances, but rather a series of individual, rational choices made in an environment where the cost of even one misstep can be catastrophic to a career, a reputation, and financial security. Surveys from recent years continue to show that a substantial percentage of men in leadership positions actively limit their exposure to situations that could be construed as compromising, whether that means declining to travel together for business, opting out of informal mentoring relationships, or simply keeping all communications documented and group based rather than private. These behaviors compound over time, creating invisible barriers that women encounter not as formal policies, but as a chilling effect on opportunity access. The result is predictable. Women find fewer advocates willing to invest time and energy in their development, fewer sponsors who will vouch for them in closed door discussions, and fewer chances to demonstrate value in high visibility projects that require close collaboration. What begins as self protection for men evolves into structural exclusion for women, not because anyone explicitly decreed it, but because the aggregate of thousands of small decisions produces the same outcome as if a policy had been written. This dynamic becomes especially evident when we look at fields where performance is measured in concrete, unforgiving terms rather than subjective evaluations or relational capital. In emergency services, military special operations, and certain industrial roles, the ability to perform under extreme physical stress separates those who can reliably contribute from those who become liabilities. Objective testing protocols expose differences that no amount of training enthusiasm or motivational rhetoric can fully erase. For example, in elite military selection processes, the physical demands involve carrying loads equivalent to body weight over long distances, repeated explosive movements, and sustained efforts in adverse conditions, where failure rates for female candidates have historically remained extraordinarily high compared to male counterparts. When a team depends on every member to execute flawlessly during life threatening scenarios, commanders cannot afford to compromise standards for the sake of representation goals. The same principle applies in firefighting operations, where dragging hoses up multiple flights of stairs while wearing heavy gear or extracting injured individuals from collapsed structures requires levels of strength and endurance that align more closely with average male physiology than female. Incidents where adjusted standards or accommodations have been implemented sometimes lead to operational failures or increased injury risks, prompting departments to revert to stricter merit only criteria. These are not abstract debates about equality, but practical matters of public safety and mission success, where the data from repeated trials consistently informs hiring and retention choices. The introduction of artificial intelligence into these evaluations only sharpens the focus on raw capability. Algorithms trained on historical performance records in physically intensive roles naturally reflect the demographic patterns that have dominated those fields for decades. Patterns built on biological realities rather than social constructs. When systems score candidates based on predictive metrics like strength to weight ratios, recovery times, or simulation outcomes, the outputs favor applicants who have demonstrated superior results in those domains without needing exceptions. Efforts to scrub gender indicators from training data often fail because correlated variables such as participation in certain sports or prior occupational histories still carry the signal. Organizations experimenting with these tools find that the recommendations align closely with what experienced leaders already observe on the ground, reinforcing a return to selection processes that prioritize demonstrated competence over demographic balancing. In an era where liability insurance costs, legal exposure, and operational reliability weigh heavily on balance sheets, decision makers gravitate toward options that minimize variables known to introduce friction or uncertainty. Shifting from physical domains to knowledge based and creative industries, similar forces are at work, though manifested through different mechanisms. In software development, data analysis, engineering design, and other technical fields, output can be quantified with increasing precision through code commits, bug resolution rates, project completion timelines, and peer review quality. When artificial intelligence augments these workflows, it amplifies individual productivity differences rather than equalizing them. Men who invest time in mastering new tools, automating repetitive tasks, and integrating large language models into their daily processes tend to see exponential gains in output, while those who resist adaptation or struggle with the learning curve fall behind rapidly. Layoffs in technology sectors during recent economic adjustments disproportionately impacted roles involving routine, administrative, coordination, or support functions, many of which had higher female representation due to prior diversity focused recruitment. As companies rehired for remaining positions, the emphasis shifted toward individuals who could immediately contribute at peak efficiency with artificial intelligence assistance, leading to hiring patterns that skewed heavily male. This was not always a conscious rejection of women, but a consequence of performance data showing who adapted fastest and delivered the most value under compressed timelines and reduced headcounts. The economic rationale extends to retention costs as well. Benefits packages that include generous parental leave, flexible scheduling for family responsibilities, and accommodations for health related absences add measurable expenses that accumulate over time. When organizations compare the total compensation and productivity equation for different demographic groups, patterns emerge where certain profiles present higher long term costs relative to output. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Men, on average, take fewer extended leaves, file fewer intermittent absence claims, and maintain more consistent attendance records in many industries. These differences, rooted in life circumstances and priorities rather than capability alone, factor into promotion and layoff decisions when resources tighten. Artificial intelligence exacerbates this by enabling finer grained tracking of contributions, making it harder to mask disparities behind team averages or subjective impressions. Managers reviewing dashboards that display individual metrics week after week see clear signals about reliability and efficiency, influencing who receives stretch assignments, who gets protected during downturns, and who faces the first round of reductions. Beyond the corporate sphere, the technological displacement of human interaction follows parallel logic. Artificial intelligence systems designed for companionship provide unwavering attention, customizable personalities, and zero risk of conflict or rejection. These platforms allow users to shape every aspect of the experience, from appearance and voice to conversational style and emotional responsiveness, delivering satisfaction without the negotiation, compromise, or vulnerability required in human partnerships. For men who have observed rising divorce rates, financial penalties in family courts, or social pressures that seem increasingly one sided, these alternatives represent a low risk, high reward path to fulfillment. The same algorithms powering recommendation engines on social media and streaming services now extend to personal domains, learning preferences with precision and refining offerings accordingly. As adoption increases, the incentive structure changes. Why invest years in building a relationship that carries substantial downside exposure when a digital counterpart delivers immediate, consistent gratification at minimal cost? This shift reduces demand for traditional dating markets, marriage counseling services, and related industries, while simultaneously diminishing the perceived necessity of female participation in social and emotional labor roles. Platforms that historically relied on human creators for adult oriented content illustrate this transition vividly. Artificial intelligence generation tools now produce hyper realistic images, videos, and interactive experiences tailored to individual fantasies, all without the overhead of compensating performers, managing schedules, or navigating platform policies around consent and authenticity. Subscribers receive unlimited customization, instant responses, and content that evolves based on feedback loops far faster than any individual creator could match. The economic advantage is overwhelming. Production costs drop dramatically while output scales infinitely, leading to rapid substitution in user behavior. Men who once supported human creators through subscriptions or tips now find equivalent or superior satisfaction through synthetic alternatives, redirecting financial flows away from real individuals and toward technology providers. This pattern mirrors broader automation trends where efficiency and customization trump human involvement when the latter introduces variables like availability constraints, personal boundaries, or interpersonal friction. These converging forces create a feedback loop that accelerates the marginalization process. As women face contracting professional opportunities, reduced networking access, and intensifying competition based on pure merit metrics, the pool of high achieving female role models shrinks in visible sectors. Younger women entering the workforce observe these realities and adjust expectations accordingly, sometimes opting for fields with stronger protections or pursuing entrepreneurial paths that offer greater autonomy. Meanwhile, men continue to concentrate in adaptable, high productivity domains where artificial intelligence serves as an enhancer rather than a replacer, building advantages that compound over careers. Society as a whole begins to reflect these imbalances, with public discourse shifting from aspirational equality narratives toward pragmatic discussions of trade offs, costs, and incentives. The uncomfortable truth is that technological progress and economic rationality do not pause for ideological preferences. They reward what works most reliably in the current environment. And right now, that environment favors traits and behaviors more commonly associated with male workforce participation. The deeper implication is a redefinition of societal roles that few anticipated when digital transformation accelerated. Traditional assumptions about mutual interdependence between men and women in both professional and personal spheres erode as substitutes emerge for nearly every function once considered inherently human. Emotional support, companionship, entertainment, even intimate connection become commoditized through code and hardware, reducing the leverage that either gender historically held over the other. Men gain unprecedented control over their social and sexual fulfillment, freeing resources and attention for career advancement, hobbies, or solitary pursuits. Women confront a landscape where traditional pathways to security through partnership or workplace advancement narrow considerably, forcing adaptation to new realities where individual merit and self reliance become paramount. This is not a zero sum game in the simplistic sense, but a reconfiguration where old equilibria dissolve and new ones form based on what technology enables and economics demands. Continuing this examination requires acknowledging that these developments unfold gradually, often masked by broader economic headlines about artificial intelligence disruption or labor market shifts. Yet, beneath the surface, statistics lies a human story of adaptation, avoidance, and realignment that affects millions. Organizations that once championed inclusive cultures now quietly recalibrate to survive in competitive global markets where tolerance for inefficiency or liability shrinks daily. Individuals make choices that aggregate into macro trends, choices driven by self interest, observed outcomes, and rational calculation rather than malice. Understanding this requires stepping back from emotional reactions and examining the incentives, data, and technologies shaping behavior at every level. The momentum behind these changes accelerates when we examine how artificial intelligence reshapes not just individual jobs, but entire occupational categories that have historically served as stable entry points and advancement ladders for women in the modern economy. Administrative support roles, human resources coordination, customer service operations, marketing content production, and even certain aspects of legal and financial documentation have all seen rapid infusion of automation tools that handle repetitive, rule based, or language intensive tasks with near perfect consistency and at negligible marginal cost after initial development. These positions, which often featured higher concentrations of female workers due to flexibility preferences, communication oriented skill sets, and prior recruitment patterns, now face the steepest displacement curves. Artificial intelligence systems parse documents, draft responses, schedule meetings, analyze customer inquiries, generate reports, and flag compliance issues faster and more accurately than human teams could manage under normal workloads. Companies that once maintained large departments for these functions discover they can achieve equivalent or superior results with a fraction of the headcount, redirecting savings toward core engineering, product development, or shareholder returns. The workers displaced in these rounds rarely return to the same organizations in comparable capacities because the roles themselves shrink or vanish entirely. Men who held parallel positions in more technical or strategic subsets of these fields tend to pivot into oversight of the new systems, training the models, auditing outputs, or transitioning into adjacent high value areas where human judgment still commands premium compensation. Women, statistically more represented in the automatable layers, encounter narrower reemployment options, often requiring complete career reinvention at precisely the moment when mid career experience should provide leverage rather than obsolescence. This occupational contraction interacts powerfully with demographic and life stage realities that further widen the divergence. Women remain more likely to interrupt careers for family formation, caregiving responsibilities, or relocation tied to a partner's opportunities, creating resume gaps, reduced cumulative experience, and interrupted skill currency that artificial intelligence era employers penalize heavily. Recruiters scanning applications now prioritize continuous engagement with cutting edge tools, recent certifications in machine learning frameworks, demonstrable side projects using generative models, or contributions to open source repositories that showcase adaptability. Interruptions, even when professionally justified, signal potential lag in a labor market that rewards relentless upskilling. Men, on balance, maintain higher continuity in these metrics, partly because societal expectations around primary breadwinning still push many to minimize voluntary breaks and maximize visible productivity signals. The outcome is a compounding advantage. Men accumulate the precise portfolio elements that artificial intelligence augmented hiring algorithms reward most, while women attempting reentry face steeper barriers to proving current relevance. Organizations, pressed by competitive pressures and investor demands for efficiency, default to candidates who present the lowest onboarding risk and the highest immediate output potential, patterns that align disproportionately with male applicants in the current environment. The financial services sector provides a particularly stark illustration of how these forces converge. Once a field where women made significant inroads through compliance, risk assessment, client relationship management, and operational oversight roles, the industry now deploys artificial intelligence for fraud detection, algorithmic trading, credit scoring, regulatory reporting, and personalized advisory services at scale. Robo advisors manage portfolios with precision that surpasses many human advisors in risk adjusted returns while eliminating emotional bias and scaling effortlessly to millions of accounts. Compliance teams that previously required dozens of analysts to review transactions now rely on anomaly detection models that process billions of data points daily. Client facing roles shrink as chat based interfaces and voice assistants handle routine inquiries, leaving only the highest net worth or most complex cases for human intervention. Hiring in the remaining human layers skews toward quantitative backgrounds, programming proficiency, and yes, experience managing machine learning pipelines. Skill clusters where male graduates still dominate pipeline statistics from top programs. Women who built careers in the softer, relationship driven segments find those segments evaporating, with replacement candidates drawn from narrower, more technically oriented pools that reflect long standing enrollment imbalances in computer science and engineering disciplines. Healthcare administration and certain clinical support functions follow a comparable trajectory. Artificial intelligence now triages patient inquiries, schedules procedures with optimal resource allocation, drafts clinical notes from voice dictation, analyzes imaging for preliminary findings, and predicts readmission risks with accuracy that rivals or exceeds seasoned professionals in controlled studies. Administrative layers that coordinated billing, insurance verification, prior authorizations, and records management shrink as natural language processing extracts relevant information from unstructured documents and automates submissions. While physicians and specialized nurses remain difficult to displace due to liability, empathy requirements, and procedural complexity, the supporting ecosystem that employed large numbers of women contracts sharply. Remaining positions demand familiarity with electronic health record integrations, data interoperability standards, and artificial intelligence workflow management, competencies more commonly acquired by individuals who pursued continuous technical education rather than career pauses. The net effect is a hollowing out of mid level roles that once provided stability and upward mobility, pushing many women toward gig style platform work, small business entrepreneurship, or fields outside the technology accelerated mainstream. Education represents another domain where substitution dynamics play out with long term societal consequences. Online learning platforms powered by adaptive algorithms deliver personalized instruction, grade assignments, provide instant feedback, and identify knowledge gaps more consistently than traditional classroom setups in many subjects. Administrative functions within schools and universities, from enrollment processing to financial aid packaging to curriculum planning support, increasingly run on automated systems that reduce staffing needs. Even teaching assistant roles in higher education face competition from chat based tutors that operate 24 hours a day without fatigue or scheduling conflicts. While human educators retain irreplaceable value in mentorship, inspiration, and handling nuanced social emotional dynamics, the scalable components of instruction migrate toward artificial intelligence, diminishing demand for entry level and support positions that historically served as gateways for women entering the profession. As budgets tighten and institutions chase efficiency metrics, hiring prioritizes faculty and staff who can design, oversee, and improve artificial intelligence enhanced learning environments rather than deliver standardized content delivery. The cumulative impact across these sectors creates a macroeconomic shift that is only beginning to register in headline employment figures. Aggregate female labor force participation rates after decades of steady gains plateau or decline in advanced economies as displacement outpaces reabsorption into new roles. Young women observing these trends recalibrate ambitions, sometimes steering toward healthcare delivery, education specialties with strong human elements, creative industries less susceptible to full automation, or self employment models that offer control over hours and output. Yet, even these fields face encroachment. Telehealth platforms reduce need for in person support staff. Virtual classrooms shrink demand for physical classroom aides. Generative tools assist with creative ideation and drafting. And e-commerce automation streamlines small business operations. The options narrow, forcing adaptation to environments where individual branding, niche expertise, or entrepreneurial risk taking become prerequisites for economic security rather than optional enhancements. On the personal front, the withdrawal from traditional relational structures deepens as artificial intelligence companions evolve from novelty to staple. Successive generations of these systems incorporate multimodal capabilities, remembering long term preferences, anticipating needs, modulating tone, based on detected mood and simulating physical presence through increasingly sophisticated robotics. Men report higher satisfaction metrics with these interactions compared to recent dating experiences, citing absence of rejection cycles, financial demands, custody disputes, or accusations that can derail careers. The perceived safety and predictability outweigh the absence of biological authenticity for a growing cohort, especially as cultural narratives around male disposability, family court biases, and social scrutiny intensify. This preference shift reduces marriage rates further, depresses birth rates in developed nations, and alters household formation patterns in ways that ripple through housing markets, consumer spending, and tax bases. Women who anticipated partnership as a component of life planning encounter a contracting pool of willing participants, prompting many to prioritize career independence, geographic mobility, or alternative support networks over traditional family trajectories. These developments do not occur in isolation from broader cultural currents. Public discourse increasingly acknowledges trade offs between equity aspirations and operational pragmatism, with fewer voices defending demographic quotas when they correlate with measurable declines in productivity, innovation velocity, or organizational resilience. Executives face pressure to deliver results in compressed timeframes, and when data indicates that certain hiring mixes introduce friction or cost without commensurate upside, adjustments follow swiftly and quietly. The language of inclusion persists in corporate communications, yet the reality on the ground reflects a return to meritocratic fundamentals, filtered through risk lenses sharpened by recent legal and reputational lessons. Observing this landscape requires intellectual honesty about incentives rather than wishful thinking about reversals that technology and economics do not support. Artificial intelligence does not care about ideology. It executes patterns derived from vast data sets and optimizes for defined objectives with relentless efficiency. When those objectives center on profit, reliability, speed, and liability minimization, the outcomes favor configurations that reduce variables known to increase uncertainty. Men, through adaptation, biological averages in certain performance domains, and behavioral choices around risk exposure, align more closely with those optimization targets in the present moment. Women face the harder task of navigating a system that has recalibrated its reward structure mid journey, requiring reinvention at a pace that few can sustain without significant support structures that are themselves eroding. The trajectory suggests a future where human contribution concentrates in domains requiring irreplaceable creativity, ethical discernment, physical dexterity beyond current robotics, or deeply contextual judgment that artificial intelligence approximates but does not fully master. Those who position themselves earliest and most aggressively in these remaining bastions capture disproportionate value, while others contend with shrinking economic leverage. Society adjusts slowly to these realities, redefining success, security, and interdependence in ways that diverge sharply from 20th century models. The acceleration of these workplace and social realignments becomes even clearer when we turn our attention to the construction, manufacturing, and logistics sectors, domains where artificial intelligence and robotics converge to redefine labor requirements in ways that favor traits and experience profiles more commonly found among men. Heavy equipment operation, site supervision, welding precision under variable conditions, structural assembly at height, and long haul transportation all demand sustained focus, physical resilience, tolerance for environmental extremes, and rapid decision making in high risk settings. Autonomous machinery, exoskeletons, drone based surveying, predictive maintenance algorithms, and self driving freight systems now handle portions of these workflows that once required large crews. The remaining human roles concentrate on oversight, troubleshooting complex failures, regulatory compliance in dynamic environments, and tasks requiring fine motor dexterity combined with strength that current robotics struggle to replicate cost effectively. Hiring pipelines in these industries have long skewed male due to apprenticeship traditions, vocational training enrollment patterns, and on the sheer physicality of entry level grunt work that weeds out candidates early. As automation compresses total headcount, the selection criteria tighten around proven reliability in adverse conditions, minimal injury history, and willingness to work irregular shifts without frequent accommodation requests. Women who have entered these fields in smaller numbers often face higher attrition during probationary periods or after injury events that disproportionately affect those with lower baseline muscle mass and bone density. The outcome is a further entrenchment of male dominance in blue collar trades that remain economically vital, even as white collar automation proceeds in parallel. Supply chain management illustrates another layer of this transformation. Artificial intelligence optimizes routing, inventory forecasting, demand sensing, supplier risk assessment, and contract negotiation through natural language analysis of thousands of documents simultaneously. Warehouse fulfillment centers deploy fleets of autonomous mobile robots that move goods with millimeter accuracy, reducing the need for pickers, packers, and sorters who once formed the backbone of distribution labor forces with significant female representation in lighter duty stations. The shift leaves supervisory, maintenance, and systems integration positions that require technical certification, programming familiarity, and on the fly problem solving under pressure. Men who transition from manual roles into these oversight capacities benefit from accumulated site knowledge and mechanical intuition, while new entrants face barriers if their resumes lack recent exposure to robotics interfaces or data driven decision tools. The gender composition of logistics leadership roles, already tilted male, solidifies further as companies prioritize candidates who can bridge legacy operations and next generation automation without extended learning curves. Energy production and utilities present yet another arena where technological displacement reinforces existing patterns. Wind turbine technicians, solar farm installers, pipeline inspectors, and nuclear facility operators work in confined spaces at elevation or in hazardous material environments that impose strict physical and endurance requirements. Drones equipped with thermal imaging and machine learning defect detection now perform routine inspections that previously required human climbers or confined space entry teams. Predictive analytics forecast equipment failures weeks in advance, slashing unplanned downtime and the associated labor needed for emergency repairs. The skilled tradespeople who remain must hold multiple certifications, demonstrate comfort with augmented reality diagnostic overlays, and maintain fitness standards for emergency response. These demands align with demographic groups that have historically dominated vocational pathways into energy infrastructure, resulting in hiring and retention that continues to favor men, even as the total number of field positions contracts. Retail and hospitality, long viewed as female friendly due to flexible scheduling and customer interaction emphasis, undergo parallel upheaval through self checkout expansion, cashierless store technologies, automated inventory robots, and AI driven reservation systems that eliminate front desk staffing in many properties. Order kiosks, mobile apps, and voice assistants handle menu customization, upselling, and payment processing with zero labor cost after installation. The surviving roles center on loss prevention, complex guest issue resolution, facility maintenance, and oversight of robotic fleets, positions that often require physical presence during off hours, conflict de escalation skills, and technical troubleshooting aptitude. Staffing decisions in these environments increasingly reflect candidates who present lower absenteeism risk, higher tolerance for variable schedules, and demonstrated ability to manage automated systems criteria that tilt outcomes toward male applicants and aggregate data reviews. The entrepreneurial landscape shifts in tandem with these corporate trends. Women launching businesses encounter funding environments where venture capital increasingly scrutinizes unit economics, customer acquisition costs, and scalability potential in artificial intelligence augmented models. Pitch decks that emphasize human centric service delivery or relationship based growth face tougher scrutiny compared to those showcasing proprietary algorithms, data moats, or hardware software integrations. Investors allocate capital toward founders who can demonstrate rapid iteration cycles, technical fluency, and ability to pivot into defensible niches amid automation waves. Male founders, statistically more likely to have engineering or computer science backgrounds and prior exposure to startup accelerators focused on deep tech, capture disproportionate share of early stage funding rounds. This funding asymmetry compounds over time, creating ecosystems where successful exits and follow on investments further concentrate resources and networks among male led ventures, limiting pathways for women to build wealth through ownership at scale. On the policy and institutional front, responses to these labor market dislocations remain fragmented and often misaligned with underlying drivers. Efforts to mandate diversity targets encounter resistance when tied to performance accountability, as boards and regulators grapple with evidence that forced demographic mixes sometimes correlate with elevated turnover, legal exposure, or innovation slowdowns in high stakes environments. Training programs aimed at closing skill gaps frequently show limited uptake among displaced workers who face competing demands of family obligations, geographic immobility, or psychological barriers to entering male coded technical fields. Government incentives for reskilling lean toward broad STEM access initiatives, yet completion rates and subsequent employment outcomes reveal persistent disparities when measured against time invested. The disconnect arises because policy frameworks still operate on assumptions of symmetric adaptability across groups, while real world data indicates asymmetric responses to the same technological shocks. Culturally, the narrative around gender and work evolves in fits and starts. Media coverage oscillates between alarmist headlines about female economic marginalization and optimistic pieces celebrating women who thrive in emerging domains like content strategy for artificial intelligence outputs, ethical AI governance, or human AI collaboration design. Yet the volume of success stories cannot offset the statistical reality of contracting opportunities in legacy middle class pathways. Public sentiment among younger cohorts reflects growing pragmatism. Many women express intent to prioritize personal financial independence, delay family formation until career stability solidifies, or pursue credentialing in fields with stronger automation resistance, such as advanced nursing, therapy specialties, or artisanal production that values human touch. Men, meanwhile, increasingly frame career choices around maximizing optionality, geographic flexibility, and exposure to high growth technologies, viewing traditional provider roles as optional rather than obligatory. The psychological dimension of this realignment deserves attention because it shapes behavior at both individual and collective levels. Men who opt for artificial companionship report reduced anxiety around rejection, sensitivity, performance pressure, and long term commitment risks, allowing mental bandwidth to redirect towards skill acquisition, side ventures, or leisure pursuits that enhance personal satisfaction. Women navigating diminished partnership prospects sometimes experience heightened urgency around self sufficiency, leading to intensified focus on credential stacking, networking within female centric professional circles, or advocacy for policy changes that slow displacement in female heavy occupations. These divergent emotional responses feed back into social dynamics, widening gaps in worldview, political preferences, and lifestyle expectations between genders. Looking further ahead, the horizon includes biotechnology and neurotechnology interfaces that could eventually narrow some performance differentials. Yet deployment timelines stretch into decades, while current economic pressures operate on quarterly and annual cycles. Robotics with soft actuators and advanced haptics may democratize physical labor roles, but cost curves suggest widespread adoption lags behind software displacement by 10 to 20 years in most sectors. Until those breakthroughs arrive at scale, the interim period solidifies advantages for those already positioned closest to the technological frontier. Societies that recognize this lag and invest aggressively in transition support, portable credential systems, and universal basic income experiments may mitigate the sharpest dislocations, while those that cling to outdated equality of outcome models risk deeper polarization and economic inefficiency. The core lesson embedded in these converging trends is that technological change respects neither sentiment nor legacy arrangements. It rewards configurations that deliver superior reliability, lower friction, and higher net value under current constraints. Individuals and institutions that internalize this principle earliest position themselves to capture upside rather than merely survive downside. Adaptation requires unflinching assessment of personal strengths, market signals, and emerging substitutes, followed by decisive action rather than prolonged resistance to forces already in motion. The reshaping of labor markets under artificial intelligence pressure extends into domains once considered largely immune to full scale technological substitution, such as creative industries, journalism, legal services, and even aspects of scientific research where the human element has historically served as a protective moat. In creative advertising, graphic design, copywriting, and video editing, generative models now produce campaign concepts, visual assets, scripts, and rough cuts in seconds based on text prompts, allowing agencies to prototype dozens of directions before committing human hours to refinement. Agencies that previously employed large teams of junior creatives for ideation and iteration now maintain smaller, elite groups focused on strategic oversight, brand voice consistency, client relationship stewardship, and final polish work that demands nuanced cultural understanding. The entry level positions that once provided on ramps for women entering these fields, positions heavy on execution rather than high level direction, disappear first, replaced by prompt engineers and model curators who require technical fluency in diffusion architectures, LoRa training, and API orchestration. Men who already possessed coding adjacent skills or who rapidly acquired them through self directed learning capture these transitional roles, while women whose backgrounds centered on traditional art school training or portfolio based advancement face steeper retooling hurdles. The result is a contraction at the base of the creative pyramid that disproportionately affects female representation in mid tier agencies and freelance marketplaces, where competition now hinges on speed of adaptation to ever improving generative pipelines. Journalism and content production follow a similar compression pattern. Automated news aggregators summarize wire reports, generate localized versions of national stories, draft earnings recaps, and even produce sports game recaps with play by play detail drawn from box scores and video analysis. Larger outlets experiment with artificial intelligence co writers that handle first drafts of investigative pieces once researchers and stringers have gathered primary source material, slashing turnaround times and labor costs. The surviving human journalists concentrate on enterprise reporting, source cultivation, ethical judgment calls, narrative crafting that requires deep contextual insight, and accountability pieces that demand public trust. These high value roles reward persistence, network depth, risk tolerance for controversial subjects, and willingness to work irregular hours in pursuit of scoops, attributes that align statistically with male career trajectories in the field over recent decades. Women who built careers in feature writing, lifestyle sections, or community reporting, areas more vulnerable to summarization and templated generation, encounter shrinking staff budgets and fewer staff writer openings, pushing many toward independent newsletters, podcasting, or branded content where personal audience connection still provides leverage against full automation. Legal services reveal one of the most economically significant shifts because the profession has long functioned as a high status, high compensation pathway with substantial female participation at associate levels. Document review, contract drafting, due diligence research, legal research memo production, and even preliminary motion drafting now fall to large language models fine tuned on case law databases, statutes, and regulatory filings. Law firms that once staffed discovery teams with dozens of junior associates and paralegals reduce those headcounts dramatically, redirecting savings toward partners who handle strategy, courtroom advocacy, client counseling, and complex negotiation. The bottleneck moves upward. Firms hire fewer entry level attorneys overall and select those with demonstrated ability to supervise artificial intelligence outputs, spot hallucination risks, craft novel arguments, and manage client expectations in high stakes litigation. Women who have comprised the majority of incoming law school classes for years now graduate into a market where traditional associate pipelines narrow sharply. Those who secure positions often face accelerated pressure to specialize in litigation, regulatory compliance with artificial intelligence implications, or intellectual property disputes around model training data, areas requiring technical fluency that many did not anticipate needing when they chose the profession. The partnership track, already long and competitive, becomes even more selective when measured against raw billable output, augmented by artificial intelligence tools, favoring individuals who maintain unbroken career momentum and minimize practice interruptions. Scientific research itself begins to reflect these pressures in grant allocation, team composition, and publication pipelines. Artificial intelligence accelerates hypothesis generation, experimental design, optimization, data analysis, figure creation, and even manuscript drafting in fields ranging from material science to bioinformatics. Research groups that previously relied on large cohorts of postdoctoral researchers and graduate students for literature, reviews, simulation runs, and statistical modeling now operate with leaner teams centered on principal investigators who direct artificial intelligence workflows and interpret high level results. Funding bodies increasingly prioritize proposals that demonstrate efficient use of computational resources and rapid iteration cycles, metrics that reward principal investigators with established technical infrastructures and networks of collaborators skilled in model deployment. Women in academia, who statistically shoulder higher teaching loads, committee service, and mentoring responsibilities alongside research, find it harder to match the publication velocity and grant capture rates of colleagues who can dedicate proportionally more time to directing artificial intelligence assisted experiments. The cumulative effect is a subtle but persistent narrowing of female representation at the full professor and national lab leadership levels, where influence over future research directions concentrates. These professional contractions intersect with housing, family formation, and geographic mobility in ways that amplify divergence. As high productivity, high compensation roles cluster in technology corridors, coastal metros, and select research hubs, individuals who secure them gain access to wealth building opportunities through equity grants, startup exits, and real estate appreciation in appreciating markets. Men who adapt fastest to artificial intelligence enhanced careers often relocate earlier and more aggressively to these nodes, building asset bases that provide long term security independent of partnership structures. Women displaced from middle class professional pathways or stalled in advancement face steeper barriers to entering those same high opportunity geographies, especially when family considerations limit willingness to uproot or when dual career synchronization becomes impossible in contracting markets. The resulting spatial sorting reinforces economic polarization. Certain cities and regions become engines of male wealth accumulation and career acceleration, while others stagnate or hollow out as legacy industries shrink without replacement growth. Consumer behavior adjusts in lockstep with these structural changes. Men who opt out of traditional dating and family formation redirect disposable income toward personal optimization, gym equipment, high end computing rigs for artificial intelligence experimentation, travel experiences, collectibles, gaming peripherals, and subscription ecosystems that deliver entertainment and companionship without relational overhead. This spending pattern fuels growth in sectors catering to solitary or male majority lifestyles, from fitness technology to virtual reality hardware to premium audio equipment, while industries built around family consumption, minivans, larger homes, school adjacent services experience softer demand in developed economies. Women, confronting narrower economic paths, allocate resources toward credential defense, personal branding, appearance maintenance as a professional signal, and financial instruments that hedge against partnership uncertainty, such as aggressive retirement contributions or real estate investments in more affordable secondary markets. The divergence in consumption priorities further separates lifestyle expectations and cultural reference points between genders. Demographic projections begin to incorporate these behavioral shifts explicitly. Declining marriage rates, delayed first births, and rising shares of adults remaining childless alter population pyramids in advanced nations faster than anticipated a decade ago. Governments face mounting pressure on entitlement systems designed around assumptions of stable family units and replacement fertility levels. Policy experiments with family incentives, tax credits, subsidized childcare, extended parental leave show limited efficacy when underlying economic incentives push both men and women toward independence rather than interdependence. Artificial intelligence companions and synthetic content further reduce the perceived necessity of human partnership for emotional and sexual fulfillment, accelerating the decoupling of intimacy from reproduction and long term commitment. The philosophical implications ripple outward. Societies built on the premise of mutual reliance between genders for economic production, child rearing, and social stability confront a reality where technology enables unilateral self sufficiency for one group while constraining options for the other. Questions of fairness, merit, biological difference, incentive alignment, and technological determinism enter mainstream discourse with greater frequency and less deference to prior consensus narratives. Intellectual frameworks that once emphasized structural barriers as primary explanations for outcome gaps lose explanatory power when artificial intelligence removes human gatekeepers and substitutes observable performance metrics. New analyses center on differential adaptability, risk tolerance, continuity of effort, and alignment with machine augmented productivity as determinants of who thrives in the emerging order. And institutions, corporations, universities, governments grapple with balancing short term survival imperatives against long term social cohesion goals. Quarterly earnings demands and competitive benchmarking push private entities toward efficiency optimizations that disregard demographic parity when it conflicts with output targets. Public institutions face conflicting mandates, maintain representative workforces while delivering services at scale in resource constrained environments. The tension manifests in quiet policy reversals, softened diversity language in annual reports, and increased emphasis on skills based rather than identity based hiring rubrics. The era of performative inclusion recedes as pragmatic competence becomes the overriding currency. Individuals navigating this landscape must adopt a mindset of radical self inventory and continuous reinvention. Waiting for structural reversals or external rescue proves futile when the underlying drivers, technological capability, economic competition, liability minimization, are accelerating rather than decelerating. Success belongs to those who identify defensible human niches early, build anti fragile skill stacks, cultivate optionality across geographies and income streams, and maintain psychological resilience in the face of rapid obsolescence cycles. The alternative is gradual marginalization within systems that no longer require broad participation to function at peak efficiency. The convergence of these forces reaches its most profound expression in the realm of military and national security institutions, where artificial intelligence integration proceeds at wartime urgency and where performance tolerances allow virtually no margin for demographic experimentation. Autonomous drones, cyber defense systems, predictive logistics modeling, threat assessment algorithms, and battlefield simulation environments now handle reconnaissance, target prioritization, electronic warfare coordination, and after action analysis with throughput that outstrips human operators by orders of magnitude. The human roles that persist center on strategic command decisions, rules of engagement adjudication, ethical override authority, physical special operations execution, and maintenance of complex weapon systems under combat conditions. Selection pipelines for these remaining positions have always been brutally meritocratic, relying on objective metrics of physical capability, cognitive processing under stress, psychological resilience, and demonstrated reliability in austere environments. Recent conflicts and training exercises continue to validate that biological sex differences in load bearing capacity, injury recovery rates, aerobic thresholds, and anaerobic power output produce measurable disparities in mission critical tasks such as sustained foot patrols with full combat loads, breaching operations, casualty evacuation over rough terrain, and prolonged submersion or high altitude exposure. When lives, national interests, and billion-dollar platforms depend on flawless execution, commanders select for the combination of attributes that historically correlates most strongly with success, resulting in force compositions that remain overwhelmingly male at the tip of the spear, even as support functions automate away. Women who serve in these institutions often excel in intelligence analysis, signals interception, cyber operations, and medical support roles. Yet the contraction of those support layers under artificial intelligence pressure reduces overall entry points and promotion velocity for female personnel across the total force structure. Intelligence agencies mirror this pattern with even greater emphasis on cognitive continuity and technical mastery. Artificial intelligence now sifts petabytes of open source and classified data, identifies behavioral anomalies, constructs network graphs of adversarial actors, generates synthetic training datasets for counterintelligence models, and drafts initial analytic products that human officers then refine for policy consumption. The agencies require fewer analysts for routine monitoring and pattern recognition, concentrating headcount on those who can direct multimodal artificial intelligence orchestration, validate model outputs against ground truth, penetrate deception campaigns, and produce finished intelligence that withstands scrutiny at the highest levels. These elite positions reward unbroken career arcs, deep subject matter expertise accumulated over decades, willingness to accept postings in hardship locations, and comfort operating in environments of extreme secrecy and accountability. Men who entered the profession during periods of heavy recruitment for technical skills maintain advantages in these criteria, while women who joined later under diversity expansion initiatives sometimes encounter compressed timelines to prove themselves before artificial intelligence reduces the total analytic footprint. The net effect is a stabilization or slight regression in female representation at senior analytic and operational leadership tiers, even as public facing diversity reporting emphasizes progress in entry level cohorts that face the steepest automation displacement. Space and aerospace sectors exhibit parallel dynamics driven by the unforgiving physics of orbital mechanics, propulsion engineering, and mission reliability. Artificial intelligence optimizes trajectory planning, satellite constellation management, anomaly detection and telemetry streams, autonomous rendezvous and docking procedures, and in orbit surfacing robotics, reducing the need for large ground control teams that once included significant numbers of women in mission planning, data reduction, and systems monitoring roles. The hands on engineering and test positions that remain, thermal vacuum chamber operations, vibration table setup, hypergolic propellant handling, high energy laser alignment, and hypersonic wind tunnel testing require physical presence in hazardous facilities, precise dexterity under time pressure, and tolerance for shift work in clean rooms or remote test ranges. Hiring for these specialized roles draws from pools with heavy representation in mechanical, aerospace, and electrical engineering disciplines where male enrollment still predominates, and where practical shop experience and certification pathways favor candidates with fewer career interruptions. Women who pursue these careers often build strong records in simulation, software verification, and project coordination. Yet the physical core engineering jobs that survive automation waves continue to select disproportionately for male candidates based on demonstrated capability in the most demanding environments. Transportation infrastructure maintenance and heavy civil engineering follow suit. Bridge inspection drones with structural health monitoring artificial intelligence, autonomous rail inspection vehicles, predictive pavement degradation models, and tunnel boring machine guidance systems shrink crews required for routine surveillance and data collection. The remaining workforce focuses on emergency repairs after natural disasters, complex retrofitting under live traffic, underwater welding, high voltage line work, and oversight of robotic fleets in confined or elevated spaces. These tasks demand combinations of strength, endurance, spatial reasoning under stress, and willingness to work at heights or in hazardous atmospheres without frequent breaks. Apprenticeship programs and union pathways that feed these roles have long been male dominated, and as total employment contracts, the competition intensifies around candidates who present the lowest risk profile for injury, absenteeism, and accommodation needs. The outcome reinforces male majorities in infrastructure trades that underpin national economic continuity, even as administrative and design support functions automate. The defense industrial base itself consolidates under these pressures. Prime contractors reduce overhead by deploying artificial intelligence across supply chain management, quality assurance testing, configuration management, technical publication generation, and proposal development. Smaller suppliers that once provided specialized human labor for component assembly, testing, and documentation face margin erosion or acquisition, concentrating work in facilities that prioritize automation and lean staffing. Engineering teams shrink to those who can integrate artificial intelligence driven design tools, finite element analysis at scale, digital twins, and additive manufacturing workflows. Selection favors individuals with continuous exposure to these technologies, often men who maintained side projects, certifications, or contributions to relevant open source ecosystems during career lulls. Women engineers who specialized in systems integration, human factors analysis, or program management encounter fewer opportunities as those functions merge into generalist roles requiring broader technical command. These sectoral contractions create cascading effects through education and training ecosystems. Vocational schools, community colleges, and university engineering programs adjust curricula toward artificial intelligence, literacy, robotics interfacing, data annotation oversight, and prompt engineering fundamentals, yet enrollment in traditional trades and technician pathways remains skewed by applicant pools shaped by prior cultural signaling. Guidance counselors steer students toward fields perceived as future proof, yet many young women still gravitate toward service oriented or administrative tracks that face the fastest obsolescence. The mismatch between training pipelines and remaining job structures widens outcome gaps, with completion rates and placement statistics reflecting differential willingness to enter physically demanding or technically intense domains. Scholarship programs targeting underrepresented groups in STEM show diminishing returns when labor market signals discourage sustained pursuit of those credentials in contracting subfields. Corporate real estate footprints shrink in tandem as remote capable artificial intelligence workflows reduce need for centralized office space. Firms downsize square footage, convert floors to collaborative hubs for remaining high value teams, and relocate to campuses optimized for hybrid engineering cultures. Men who secure positions in these streamlined environments gain proximity to decision makers, informal knowledge transfer, and serendipitous collaboration that accelerate career velocity. Women attempting to re enter or advance in these settings face additional hurdles when family responsibilities limit full time office presence or frequent travel for client facing or site inspection roles that resist full remote substitution. The geographic concentration of opportunity in select innovation districts further entrenches advantages for those that are already mobile and unencumbered by dual career constraints. Social capital networks evolve accordingly. Professional associations, alumni groups, and industry conferences that once served as leveling mechanisms now prioritize content on artificial intelligence strategy, ethical deployment, and scaling machine learning operations. Attendance and leadership roles gravitate toward individuals who can speak credibly to those topics, often men who invested early in relevant expertise. Women focused networks shift emphasis toward mutual support in entrepreneurship, personal finance, and alternative career paths outside corporate ladders, reflecting recognition that traditional advancement routes narrow. These parallel ecosystems reduce cross gender mentorship and sponsorship opportunities, accelerating the bifurcation of professional trajectories. The broader cultural feedback loop intensifies. Popular media increasingly portrays male characters as solitary high achievers mastering technology in isolation, while female characters navigate economic precarity, relational disappointment, or reinvention through self employment. Streaming algorithms reinforce these archetypes by promoting content that resonates with observed viewing patterns, deepening generational imprinting. Public intellectuals debate whether technological displacement constitutes a market driven correction of prior overcorrections or an emergent form of structural realignment that requires new social contracts. The conversation grows less polite and more data driven as lived experience diverges from aspirational messaging. Looking across the horizon, quantum computing, advanced neuromorphic hardware, and embodied artificial intelligence with dexterous manipulation may eventually reopen certain physical and cognitive domains. Yet economic deployment lags far behind laboratory demonstrations. In the intervening decades, the advantage accrues to those who master the current technological regime, build resilient personal economies, and cultivate psychological independence from traditional interdependence models. Societies that adapt fastest through portable skill credentials, modular education systems, decentralized economic incentives, and honest reckoning with differential outcomes stand the best chance of preserving cohesion amid transformation. Those that resist or misdiagnose the drivers risk stagnation, resentment, and lost global competitiveness. The transformation sweeping through these institutions and industries ultimately converges on a single, inescapable outcome: the redefinition of economic value itself in an age where artificial intelligence decouples productivity from traditional human participation patterns. What once required balanced teams drawing from broad demographic pools now concentrates value in narrow bands of hyper specialized contributors who can command and direct machine intelligence at scale. The premium shifts decisively toward individuals capable of architecting complex systems, debugging emergent behaviors in large models, negotiating edge cases in autonomous operations, and maintaining strategic oversight across distributed computational infrastructures. These roles demand not just technical proficiency, but a particular psychological profile: tolerance for ambiguity in rapidly evolving toolsets, obsessive attention to incremental improvements, willingness to work in solitary or small team configurations for extended periods, and immunity to the social pressures that once drove collaborative norms. Aggregate data from hiring platforms, productivity dashboards, and patent filings increasingly show that men populate these high leverage positions at rates far exceeding population parity, not because of exclusionary gatekeeping in the classical sense, but because the behavioral and experiential prerequisites align more frequently with male career histories in the current technological regime. This value concentration produces winner take most dynamics that ripple outward through compensation structures, wealth accumulation, and intergenerational transfer. Top tier artificial intelligence architects, systems integrators, and model trainers capture compensation packages that include substantial equity upside, performance bonuses tied to deployment metrics, and access to exclusive networks of capital providers. The compounding effect over a decade creates personal fortunes that dwarf what was achievable in prior eras through steady corporate advancement or professional partnership. Men who positioned themselves early through self taught coding during off hours, contributions to public model repositories, participation in hackathons focused on frontier capabilities, or rapid mastery of successive tool generations reap disproportionate rewards. Women attempting parallel trajectories often start from different baselines. Heavier undergraduate debt loads from fields that promise stability but delivered obsolescence, career interruptions that disrupt momentum in fast moving domains, or professional networks built around human centric rather than machine centric competencies. The wealth gap that emerges is not static, it widens exponentially as those with early advantages reinvest in personal compute resources, private data sets, fine tuning infrastructure, and venture allocations that further entrench their position. Housing markets in high opportunity regions reflect this divergence with brutal clarity. In technology centric metros, single family home prices, condominium premiums, and rental rates for premium units climb on sustained demand from high earning individuals who prioritize location near innovation clusters, robust data center connectivity, and lifestyle amenities tailored to solitary or low obligation living. Developers respond with smaller footprint luxury residences, co-living arrangements optimized for remote technical work, and amenity packages emphasizing personal wellness studios, high bandwidth connectivity, and minimal shared spaces. Family oriented housing stock, larger suburban homes with multiple bedrooms, yards, and proximity to quality school districts, sees softer relative appreciation or outright stagnation in comparison. Young men accumulating capital through artificial intelligence, augmented careers purchase properties earlier and in more desirable locations, building equity positions that serve as both wealth stores and social signals. Women navigating narrower professional paths delay homeownership, opt for rental stability in secondary markets, or co invest with family members, limiting exposure to the strongest asset class appreciation cycles. Retirement and long term financial security patterns diverge along similar lines. Men in advantage positions max out deferred compensation plans, contribute aggressively to self directed investment accounts, and allocate to high volatility assets with long time horizons, confident in their ability to replace income streams if needed. Women facing greater employment volatility or lower peak earning potential lean toward conservative vehicles, annuities, government backed securities, defined benefit remnants, prioritizing predictability over growth. The disparity compounds through Social Security calculations, where lifetime earnings histories determine benefit levels, and through private pension equivalent structures that reward continuous high contribution careers. By mid century, actuarial projections suggest meaningful differences in retiree living standards between genders, driven not by overt discrimination, but by cumulative effects of career continuity, compensation peaks, and investment compounding in an artificial intelligence accelerated economy. Family law and inheritance dynamics begin to shift in response. As marriage rates continue their multi decade decline and cohabitation without formal contracts rises among younger cohorts, the traditional mechanisms for wealth transfer through spousal or child claims weaken. Men who remain single or enter brief, prenuptially protected unions retain control over accumulated assets, directing them toward personal foundations, charitable vehicles, sibling or parental support, or direct bequests to chosen heirs rather than default family structures. Courts in jurisdictions with evolving precedents increasingly respect individual autonomy and asset division when no children are involved and when economic contributions are demonstrably asymmetric. This reduces the perceived financial risk of partnership for high net worth men, while simultaneously diminishing one historical pathway for women to achieve economic security through relational leverage. The cultural shift toward viewing marriage as optional lifestyle choice rather than economic necessity accelerates, further depressing demand for traditional family formation services and related industries. Education debt burdens amplify these trajectories. Student loans taken for degrees in fields now experiencing rapid displacement, communications, general business administration, certain social sciences, education specialties carry interest accrual through periods of underemployment or gig work, eroding net worth at precisely the moment when peers in technical disciplines begin aggressive debt paydown and investment. Forgiveness programs tied to public service employment shrink as government agencies themselves automate administrative layers, reducing qualifying positions. The resulting debt overhang constrains geographic mobility, home purchase capacity, and risk tolerance for entrepreneurial ventures among those carrying higher balances, disproportionately women who pursued credentials aligned with pre automation labor market assumptions. The gig and creator economies, once viewed as democratizing alternatives, reveal their own automation ceilings. Platform algorithms now optimize content recommendation, audience targeting, pricing, and even creator branding through synthetic avatars and voice cloning. Independent contractors who once built followings through personality driven output face competition from infinitely scalable artificial intelligence personas that deliver consistent tone, 24-hour availability, and customized interaction without burnout or scheduling conflicts. Earnings concentrate among the top fraction who pivot to directing artificial intelligence enhanced production, scripting meta prompts, curating training data, managing multi model pipelines, while the long tail of human creators sees revenue erosion. Men who entered these spaces with technical curiosity or gaming adjacent backgrounds adapt faster to the new production paradigm, capturing residual high value niches. Urban planning and public infrastructure investment begin reflecting these demographic and economic realities. Cities that once expanded family friendly amenities, playgrounds, school zoning incentives, family transit subsidies, recalibrate towards single occupancy mobility solutions, high density micro units, and co working environments optimized for technical professionals. Public transportation projects prioritize speed and reliability for commute patterns dominated by high earning solo workers rather than family logistics. Parks and recreational facilities shift emphasis toward individual fitness zones, quiet contemplation areas, and technology integrated experiences over large group gathering spaces. Tax bases supported by concentrated high income earners allow continued investment in innovation districts while legacy neighborhoods face deferred maintenance or gentrification pressures as capital flows follow opportunity. The geopolitical dimension emerges as nations compete to attract and retain the narrow class of artificial intelligence talent. Immigration policies liberalize for individuals with proven model training experience, deployment track records, or contributions to frontier repositories, creating brain drain dynamics that favor countries offering the strongest compute access, regulatory freedom, and capital formation environment. Domestic workforces in lagging nations face accelerated displacement without offsetting high value job creation, widening global inequality along technological adoption lines. Strategic competition intensifies around semiconductor supply chains, energy abundance for training clusters, and data sovereignty frameworks, with implications for military capability, economic dominance, and cultural influence that extend far beyond labor market statistics. At the deepest level, this entire realignment forces a reckoning with the purpose of human activity in a world where machines increasingly handle production, coordination, analysis, and even companionship. Societies must decide whether to double down on preserving broad participation through redistribution mechanisms, universal services, and deliberate economic design, or to accept radical stratification as the price of frontier velocity. The choice is not abstract. It manifests in budget priorities, regulatory postures, education reform, and cultural narratives that either normalize divergence or attempt to counteract it. History suggests that technological waves rarely reverse under moral suasion alone. They reshape incentives until new equilibria form around what proves sustainable. The final threads of this transformation weave into the fabric of everyday life in ways that are both subtle and irreversible, altering how people structure their days, form identities, pursue meaning, and measure personal success in a world where artificial intelligence has already claimed so much of what once defined contribution and connection. Morning routines for many men now center on personal optimization cycles that exclude relational negotiation, automated meal prep systems synced to biometric feedback, virtual trainers delivering customized workouts via augmented reality overlays, algorithmic news feeds curated for maximum intellectual stimulation without emotional drag, and companion interfaces that greet the day with tailored affirmations and agenda alignment. These rituals build psychological momentum towards solitary productivity peaks, where the first hours after waking produce output that compounds career leverage far more reliably than shared domestic responsibilities ever could. The absence of morning conflict, compromise, or emotional labor creates mental bandwidth that translates directly into higher quality code commits, sharper strategic thinking, or faster mastery of emerging tools. Over months and years, this compounding advantage solidifies into career trajectories that appear almost superhuman in their consistency and velocity, compared to paths interrupted by family logistics or partnership maintenance. Women adapting to the same landscape often construct parallel but distinct daily architectures built around defensive self reliance and proactive signaling. Mornings may involve layered credential maintenance, reviewing industry newsletters for artificial intelligence displacement warnings, completing micro certifications in prompt engineering or data labeling oversight, curating professional feeds that highlight women thriving in niche human centric domains, and allocating time to personal branding activities that emphasize irreplaceable qualities like nuanced empathy, ethical discernment, or creative intuition that current models still approximate imperfectly. The emotional undertone carries a persistent awareness of narrowing margins. Every hour invested must yield measurable defensibility against obsolescence. Every networking interaction must counterbalance reduced sponsorship access. Every financial decision must hedge against partnership uncertainty. The result is a life rhythm characterized by vigilance rather than relaxed accumulation, where success feels like sustained survival rather than effortless expansion. Leisure and recreation patterns diverge in parallel. Men increasingly gravitate toward immersive, solitary, or small group pursuits that technology enhances without social friction. High fidelity virtual reality simulations for exploration or competition, personalized music generation ecosystems that evolve with mood, collectible digital assets that appreciate through scarcity algorithms, extreme fitness challenges tracked by wearable ecosystems, and travel itineraries optimized for individual discovery rather than group compromise. These activities deliver dopamine hits calibrated to personal preference without the risk of relational volatility or scheduling misalignment. Women facing similar discretionary time constraints but different incentive structures often channel leisure into community oriented or credential enhancing outlets. Women only mastermind groups focused on entrepreneurial pivots, wellness retreats emphasizing resilience training, creative workshops that blend traditional crafts with artificial intelligence assistance, or advocacy networks pushing for policy protections in vulnerable sectors. The divergence reinforces separate cultural ecosystems where shared reference points erode, making cross gender casual conversation increasingly strained as lived experiences drift further apart. Identity formation itself undergoes profound recalibration. For men, self concept increasingly anchors in mastery over systems, technological, financial, physical, rather than relational provision or social status derived from family roles. The archetype of the self sufficient operator who commands resources, optimizes personal performance, and maintains emotional sovereignty gains cultural currency through online communities, media portrayals, and success narratives that celebrate an independence as the ultimate flex. Pride shifts from being needed by others to being unnecessary to anyone, a form of power that feels liberating after decades of perceived obligation. Women, confronting the same cultural currents, frequently redefine worth around autonomous achievement, aesthetic self expression, intellectual independence, or communal impact outside traditional family metrics. The pressure to signal capability in a contracting opportunity environment leads to heightened emphasis on visible markers of competence, resilience, and uniqueness. Personal style as armor, credentials as shields, networks as lifelines. Both trajectories produce stronger individual identities, yet weaker collective interdependence, contributing to a society where loneliness metrics rise even as self reported life satisfaction holds steady or improves among those who adapt successfully. Health and longevity pursuits reflect these shifts with clinical precision. Men invest heavily in biohacking protocols, continuous glucose monitoring, peptide regimens, sleep optimization protocols, strength training cycles designed around recovery data, because extended peak performance directly correlates with economic leverage in artificial intelligence augmented fields. Preventive medicine focuses on maintaining cognitive sharpness and physical capability well into later decades, anticipating careers that may stretch longer as traditional retirement assumptions weaken. Women, aware of biological timelines that artificial intelligence cannot fully override, often prioritize reproductive health preservation alongside career defense. Egg freezing timed to financial milestones, hormone optimization strategies that balance energy and longevity, stress management techniques calibrated to chronic vigilance. The dual focus creates different health investment portfolios, with men leaning toward performance extension and women toward timeline management, further separating life course expectations. Community structures evolve from geographic or workplace proximity toward interest based, digital first affinity groups that transcend traditional boundaries. Men congregate in forums centered on technological frontiers, financial independence strategies, physical discipline challenges, or philosophical explorations of post relational existence. Spaces where candor about incentives and outcomes replaces polite consensus, Women form parallel networks emphasizing mutual economic support, career pivot mentorship, policy advocacy, and emotional resilience in uncertain landscapes. These digital tribes provide belonging without the obligations of physical co location or familial duty, reducing the social penalty for opting out of conventional roles. The weakening of mixed gender civic organizations, hobby groups, and neighborhood associations follows naturally as shared activities lose participants who find superior alternatives online or in single sex cohorts. Consumer brands recalibrate messaging and product lines to capture these emerging segments. Advertising campaigns targeting men emphasize sovereignty, optimization, and frictionless pleasure, sleek hardware for personal compute clusters, premium solitary travel experiences, performance nutrition without family sized packaging. Brands aimed at women highlight empowerment through preparation, versatility, and community. Modular career tools, aesthetic wellness products that double as professional signals, subscription services for credential acceleration and mutual support. The bifurcation extends to retail experiences, with some chains designing store layouts around solo efficiency and others emphasizing collaborative discovery zones, reflecting the diverging ways people now shop, socialize, and signal identity through consumption. Art and entertainment respond by mirroring and amplifying the split realities. Narrative fiction increasingly explores themes of technological solitude versus relational precarity, with male protagonists mastering artificial worlds while female protagonists navigate shrinking human systems. Visual media, films, series, video essays experiment with aesthetics that evoke isolation, triumph, or communal defiance, training audiences to find beauty in either extreme. Music genres splinter further into introspective electronic landscapes for solitary immersion and lyrical anthems of collective resilience, each finding dedicated audiences that rarely overlap. The cultural output reinforces the lived divergence, making integrated worldviews feel increasingly anachronistic. At the societal scale, governance faces mounting challenges in maintaining cohesion amid these centrifugal forces. Tax structures designed around dual income households with children yield declining revenue as single earner and childless configurations proliferate. Entitlement programs strain under altered dependency ratios, prompting debates over universal basic services versus targeted transition support. Education systems wrestle with curriculum relevance when foundational skills face rapid obsolescence, while universities grapple with enrollment collapses in legacy disciplines and explosive growth in computational specializations. Criminal justice systems encounter shifting patterns of motivation and risk as economic desperation concentrates in certain demographics and technological surveillance reduces certain offense categories. Foreign policy adjusts to a world where national power increasingly correlates with compute capacity, talent retention, and energy abundance rather than population size or traditional industrial base. The deepest philosophical tension lies in whether humanity accepts this divergence as an emergent feature of progress or attempts large scale intervention to preserve older equilibria. Proponents of acceptance argue that forcing symmetry in outcomes contradicts the very incentives that drive innovation and adaptation, risking stagnation in a competitive global arena. Advocates for intervention contend that unchecked stratification threatens social fabric, democratic legitimacy, and long term stability, justifying redistributive mechanisms, mandatory reskilling quotas, or regulatory brakes on displacement velocity. Neither position commands consensus because the forces at play operate below the level of deliberate policy. They emerge from billions of individual optimizations interacting with exponential technological capability. In the end, the picture that emerges is neither apocalyptic nor utopian, but relentlessly pragmatic. Technology has not eliminated human value. It has concentrated it in configurations that reward specific traits, behaviors, and timing more than ever before. Those who recognize the shift early align personal incentives with emerging realities and build anti fragile existences, capture outsized agency in the new order. Those who cling to outdated assumptions or await rescue find their options steadily narrowing. The era rewards clarity, adaptability, and decisive self direction above sentiment or nostalgia. If you have journeyed with me through every layer of this transformation, from workplace purges to sectoral contractions, companion displacement, wealth compounding, identity recalibration, daily ritual divergence, cultural splintering, governance strains, and philosophical tension, you are among the rarest segment of the 1 hour gang, the uncompromising few who demand the complete architecture without dilution or evasion. If these angry guy breakdowns have mapped the terrain you need to see, consider fueling the next one by buying me a Red Bull through the link in the description. Leave a comment below with your final reflections on how these interlocking shifts from morning routines to geopolitical stakes feel when viewed as one continuous system, whether any particular downstream effect alarms or energizes you most, if the philosophical fork in the road seems resolvable, or what single personal adjustment you are committing to right now in response to everything laid out here. Like the video if you like it. Do not forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.